Good morning, everyone, to at least sunny Los Angeles. Yesterday was rainy about this time, a little bit chilly. What a terrific panel we have today. So the kind of the headline, Asian excellence, creative excellence, what does that mean? I think all of us who've ever went to a movie, turned on a TV, picked up a book this last days have really seen the flourishing of Asian American content. And so we have a mix of panelists from the world of film, television, books, music. And so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about, this moment in time. What do we celebrate? This beginning of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Woohoo! But let's make sure it's not just one day or 1 month that we celebrate. So we're going to talk really about the content, the creativity that's out there, and what do we need to do to make sure it's not just a moment in time. And so really that's, we're going to wrap with a bunch of questions. Actually I can have people, if you want, send in questions. There's a QR code there, but I can't guarantee we'll get to them. But let's set the stage. For those of you who, like me, always watch the Oscars, we have with us extraordinary producer Jenna Yang, but also the head of the Motion Picture Arts Academy. Jenna, where are we? Tell us what happened earlier this year. I think everyone should know, but I live in Southeast Asia where we love Michelle Yeoh. Tell us what happened this year.
Whoa, what a year, and how lucky am I to be in this position this year. In 1937, a woman named Louise Rayner won an Oscar for playing a Chinese farmer in the movie A Good Earth. She was obviously not Asian. Not only that, Annie Mae Wong, who was a very established actress at the time, was not even considered for the role. And only one other actress, Asian actress, was nominated up until this year, which was Merle Oberon. She did not actually reveal her identity as being biracial. So 86 years after Louise Rayner won her Oscar, we finally have an Asian actress playing an Asian woman in a movie with an all-Asian cast. That is progress.
Woo-hoo! And what a movie. What a glorious movie.
Amazing movie that's not your typical movie either. It's groundbreaking in so many ways, creatively, in the way that it was put together, so many things about it. So how can we say there hasn't been progress? But there's still work to be done, of course. We have made progress not just in representation on screen, but the movie had a lot of Asian, had Mandarin and Cantonese in it. This is a symbol for sure, a historic one. But again, there's so much work to be done because there are many, many other stories of those who have not had that kind of success, who in a more equitable world would have.
Yeah, Jenna, you had brought a couple photos. I'm going to call up what I think number
okay,
one.
Yeah.
Can we get that photo up?
Yeah. These are just a few. This was at a time. Where are they up somewhere? The first one. Oh, there. This was well before anyone had a notion that Everything Everywhere All at Once was actually going to continue on this rocket circuit to the moon. It was just like, oh, what a fun movie! How fun! So that was us celebrating at her birthday party.
So that's Michelle Yeoh over there, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. I figured everybody knew who that was.
Yeah.
And then this is a photograph from another groundbreaking movie. This is also well before the movie Crazy Rich Asians came out. This is at a conference that I hosted. And I guess this speaks to how important it is to celebrate talent as it's emerging, not after it's won awards, not after it's made, $100 million at the box office, but while it's happening in real time. You just never know. And that is why I feel so gratified, because our community has come together. There's many organizations now, like Gold House, like others, which are doing the work at the ground level. And we're not just waiting to jump on the bandwagon after there's a worldwide phenomenon of an actress winning an Oscar. So Crazy Rich Asians was groundbreaking for our community in many ways. It showed, this is me at the Oscars. I don't know, I just picked some random photos. They said, send some photos. Sorry. They said it looked like I came from, yeah, they said, oh, you were wearing a dress from Star Trek. I'm like, yeah, yes. And just to run through the two others that I randomly picked, this is at our nominees luncheon. I remember that because I was wearing a green dress, otherwise I wouldn't have remembered. But the Daniels, and this last one is also at the nominees luncheon. Again, I had to sit on this information for a while of what the nominations were. I'm like, oh my God, everything got more nominations than any other film. And it was not an obvious result in the moment. None of it was obvious. None of it was obvious. It was all, we were all kind of watching with amazement and awe as it was happening. So again, the early stages, the work that people do, none of us do this for fame or fortune, I can promise you. We are so used to rejection. We are so used to battling, forces. We're all Jedis in our work. But then every now and then we get this kind of award. It's never easy, and I would sum up by saying we need support from the financial community desperately, because we work in darkness alone, with no evidence of success in sight often, and we just plow through, really relying on our instincts, our passions, and sometimes we come out at the other end and there's a little glory, but that's not why we're doing it. But so hopefully with this community, the message I would say to you is please support us, please support the artist. Thank you.
Absolutely. So when we think about a Milken event, there's people with capital.
Yeah.
Clearly, we love you all. But there's also people with ideas. I always steal this line from Mike Milken that always you might have a great idea, I don't know, for philanthropy, for a movie, for a book, but if you don't have the capital, sometimes it just stays an idea. And so, the purpose of this panel is also to bring a spotlight of original storytelling, of unique storytelling that lets lean in to our backgrounds as Asian or Asian Americans. I want to go to Daniel Dae Kim, who among many things, Lost, producer, The Good Doctor, but also part of the White House initiative to really spotlight our Asian American community. I think you and Eric are flying out right after this for a big White House ceremony tomorrow. So I want to get your thoughts on this topic of really creative excellence. Why is it happening now? What is happening? What are you seeing? What are the challenges?
Well, I think Janet put it so well, that we're in a situation now where we've never been before, and the thing that I want to follow up on that you mentioned is that, when you look back at history, you see these seminal events and you think, oh, wow, well, that's kind of when that happened. But what you don't think is how much work went into that single event. Like even when you look at things like the American Civil Rights Movement, we look at that as like understood pieces of history now. Well, most of us. But at the time, the struggle that America was going through, there was no guarantee of any of it. There was no guarantee that America would change. And so when we have films like Everything Everywhere All at Once and TV shows like Beef and even Crazy Rich Asians and the Joy Luck Club, which Janet produced, these are really important steps along the way with people who are willing to do the work without an assurance of success. For this audience here, it's very much a startup mentality. You have scrappy people who are very capable, who need to be capitalized, and some of you will make it, and some of you will not. But you have to believe in the cause. You have to be completely passionate. So what happens from here, though? Now that we have people like Janet and Padma and Eric, in such high-profile positions, is to create more of a situation where we can talk to others and encourage them to contribute in similar ways, to take the ball that we've moved down the field and bring it to the goal line, not to use a sports metaphor, but that's really what it is. If this is the beginning of a movement and not a moment, then there needs to be people to take up the mantle. So, for the people in this audience, you may not be in the entertainment industry, but we all have spheres of influence. We all have wallets. We all have bank accounts where we can support, content that you feel strongly about. And it's important that we speak up for the things that are important to us, especially as Asian Americans, because for so long in this country, we've been considered invisible. So, but we've always had an outsized spending power compared to our population. We just haven't used it to support Asian American projects. So that's one thing to do. But I would also say, don't do it out of charity. You know, encourage people to create good content. And if there are ways that you can be involved with that in some fashion, like there are great stories out there right now. I'm working on a project right now about Bill Huang from Archegos, which many of you in this room will know. But these are also, you know, there are great stories to be found in every sector. And, you know, mining those stories and creating those stories for yourself, I think, is really important.
No, what are you seeing? Are you seeing that change? You've been in this business a while.
He's saying I'm old, but that's okay. I am.
But we look young. Always remember that.
That's right.
Good Asian genes.
No, I think like growing old, especially in this business, is a privilege because not many of us have been around as long as some of us have. You know, and the fact that we've been able to make a career is saying something.
Absolutely.
Because anyone in this industry has a very high attrition rate, regardless of race or gender or religious affiliation. But you know, for those of us on this stage, we've had specific challenges because of what we look like that make it all the more worth celebrating that we're all here and thriving. So that is something that I think shouldn't go without saying.
No, thank you. Hey, can I call up slide number? Let's do number 7. Let's do 6 first. So these 2 slides, so this is 6. This is a book that's come out on sale just around the corner at our Milken Institute pop-up bookstore. But Padma, we're moving, let's say, from film to television. People know Top Chef, but tell us about actually the 2nd season of a show you're working on right now, which for me really illustrates what this panel is all about.
Well, Taste the Nation is in its 2nd season, and it's coming out this Friday. And I'm super proud of it. It's a show, you know, it's so rare in our business that you think of an idea in your head, as we were talking about, and you actually get to make it, because film and television are so collaborative, and there's so many reasons why it gets diluted into something else. And you know, it's been the privilege of my career to think of something in my head and actually have it come out exactly like I want it to, and have people respond so positively. We got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is born exactly out of this type of frustration of not seeing our stories. And you know, it came out of my advocacy on immigrant rights with the ACLU, and I wanted to tell stories and give my platform to people who don't normally see themselves in mainstream media in an A-list way. And so, you know, it's posing as a food show, and there's lots of yummy food on it, but it's really a cultural show and a political show, and it seeks to make us understand our fellow Americans better through food and humor and also some pathos. And I hope you'll all watch it. And you know, talking about getting projects made, I'm, you know, with all humility, I'm one of the most well-known women in food around the world. Top Chef is in 174 territories, and it took me so long to get Taste the Nation made. 6 or 7, I can't remember the number, but at least 6 networks turned me down. One network executive who's no longer working at that network even wrote me an email that was like 600 words about why he turned it down. But I'm so glad that I didn't give up, and I'm so glad that I wound up at Hulu, because I could, as a filmmaker, I could not ask for a better partner in Hulu and Disney. And I'm so grateful to all of our participants. Every season I have committed to going to an Indigenous community. Every season I have committed to going to an Asian community, you know, a Black community. And we have a great lineup. I think you have a video also.
Yeah, can we set up the video?
So sure. So in the holiday edition, I just want to call out Eric Nam, because he is one of our participants and so generous. We do an episode on Sualal, which is Korean New Year. But in this season, we feature Filipinos in Daly City, and we also, yes, where am I? All right. I grew up with you guys in La Puente, in the San Gabriel Valley, so this one's for you. But I also do an episode with Cambodian Americans in Lowell, Massachusetts, and this is basically my answer to people who say that people of color or immigrants or refugees drain our economy and take our jobs. In the case of Lowell, Massachusetts, in one generation, Cambodians have revitalized that town, they've revitalized that economy, they've opened businesses, they've even cleaned up the river nearby so everybody in their family can fish. So you're going to see a clip of a business owner who came here to this country years ago, fleeing the genocide by the Khmer Rouge. So please take a look.
One morning, I remember I woke up, my mom and dad said, we gotta move from our house. You know, that's when the Khmer Rouge take over. I don't know what happened. Is something go wrong? They catch all those people, including my dad, took him away, and I never see him again. I don't really remember what my dad looked like. I was so young back then. Every time I bring it up, I always have this emotion. It's just like, this has really happened to me, and it did.
I'm really thankful that you're talking to me about it because I don't think people know. And so you spent 5 or 6 years in Thailand in basically a refugee camp.
Like no food. You know, we eat a rice porridge, maybe half of the bowl once a day.
And that's why you were having to forage?
Yeah.
And that is a difficult moment, obviously, that he's talking about, but I'm here to tell you, Simply Kamai, which is his and his wife's restaurant, is thriving, is delicious. If you ever are in Lowell, please go see them. It is so yummy.
Yeah, thank you. And just to go back to your book,
yes,
a little about your book that's just coming out.
It's actually not coming out, but it's
coming out in our bookshop here.
Oh yes, but it's somehow having a resurgence, you know. For so much of my life, because of also my Indian upbringing and growing up in America, I was so worried about fitting in and having and worrying about what people thought. I tried to be whatever they wanted me to be in Hollywood just to get in the door for the audition. And finally, you know, I got to a point where I just said, fuck it. And I did. And there's so much being written about me in the New York Post. The narrative of my life was just taken from me in such a way. So I wrote this memoir about food and love and loss. And, you know, it was a real turning point for me because it was the start of me reclaiming my own narrative. And now there's really nobody who can say anything that I haven't said about myself. And as a woman who comes from a very conservative culture, as a person of color working in Hollywood, it feels liberating to finally say, yeah, this is who I am, and take it or leave it, because I love it.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that. First, let me know, unlike the Oscars, we don't have a 3-second lag. So I can't comment on the language.
That's okay.
But
we're all
these are real people, and this is really about real stories, right? Eric, you know, when we put together this panel, we were thinking, you know, we want a diversity of South Asians, you know, Southeast Asians, but focused really also on the various aspects of what I call the creative economy. So of course there's books, there's films, there's television. Eric, you know, I know you're going to be in a movie too, but I want you to talk about your music and your own journey and what you're seeing now, this evolution that, you know, do you feel it's just a moment in time? I remember when we first met and talked about your career, it's almost like you went to Korea first to be bigger and then came back to the US. Yeah. You know, are you seeing now that doesn't necessarily have to be the way forward as people look at great content driven by people's stories?
Yeah, I think that's the hope. And to give everybody a little bit of context, I'm born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and I started my career as a musician in Korea. And one of the most common questions that I got is, why did you go to Korea to start your career? And simply put, it's because I didn't think I had an opportunity to become a musician in the States. Even to this day, when people, you know, we all know BTS, we know Blackpink, and K-pop has become this major global phenomenon. But if you ask yourself, is there an Asian American pop star that I can name off the top of my head right now.
Vietnam.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, sometimes I'll get that answer, but oftentimes a lot of people struggle to come up with more than one or two. And you know, when we think about that's also people who are just now starting to break. It's only been in the past few 2, 3, 4 years since we've been having this moment as Asian creatives that we have these names, these younger Gen Z kids who are getting signed to major labels, but it's again a very, very new thing. And so when I started my career 10 years ago, I looked at the landscape, I looked at record labels and what the traditional ways of becoming a musician were, and I never saw myself. And so I ended up doing the YouTube thing, putting up videos on YouTube, hoping to get discovered or found in some way. And that's pretty much what happened, but it came through a TV show in Korea. So I think I'm very grateful to have been able to start my career in Korea and to build something from, I guess, my parents' homeland. But at the same time, I'm distinctly American, born and raised here. So trying to create a system and I guess an environment for people who look like us to really pursue every dream, whatever that dream may be from a young age, I think is what I hope we're able to create beyond what we're having right now and beyond just a moment.
Yeah. Hey, I want to open up to all our panel as we talk about some of these issues. You know, this is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And in that broad diversity, there's a lot of stories not being told. Really when I envision this panel, it's like I want someone from every part of the major regions of Asia, but it's whoever's available. There's a friend of mine has brought out, I think it's called The Harvest, Southeast Asian, Lao American, because their stories aren't being told either, but the issue was financing, right? And I think he sold some crypto to help finance that film. That era is changing. But how do we get people to think differently? You know, how have you succeeded in getting capital and support for your programs? I mean, earlier you noted it's still difficult, even though, you're so famous, Padma, but still, they're not financing, or they just want to finance the same old thing. I thought we're going to have 15 Crazy Rich Asians film, but there's so many more stories than the Crazy Rich Asian story. Any of you?
Well, I can say that, as many people as there are who are creating content now and who want to do music and food shows and films, I share Padma's sentiment in that, all of us up here, Janet included, have maybe developed 50 to 100 projects. I know my company alone has developed at least 50 over the last 3 or 4 years. And they all center marginalized communities or communities of color. But we're still subject to someone to approve them, whether it's a studio head or a financier for an independent project. We are not the end of the production line. We create, but we're still subject to approval. So that's one thing that I think is really important for us to remember as Asian Americans, that it's important to have representation in the C-suites at the upper levels as much as possible. So, it's statistically borne out that Asian Americans tend to be overrepresented in the entry-level positions of Fortune 500 companies, but they suffer the highest attrition rate as they climb the corporate ladder. So when you look at the CEOs and CFOs of Fortune 500 companies, you see the exact opposite. You see an underrepresentation of Asian Americans. What is the reason for that? Why in these respective industries are we not climbing at the same rate that other demographics are? And we're not, every demographic has its own set of challenges. This is particular to Asian Americans, I would say. But one of the things that we can do is to support organizations like Gold House, where Janet and I sit on the board. And there's an organization called the Asian American Foundation that was just started recently. Both of these organizations share a common mission to encourage narrative change. And so because of what we can do, let me put it this way. Television, film, and media is a passive value delivery system. So you think about your favorite shows as a kid. What did you learn from those shows that weren't necessarily scripted? Like, for instance, a lot of my friends in Korea learned English by watching Friends. And so that's the power of media. But if you watch Friends, the other things you learn about that are that you can be broke and young and still have a fabulous apartment in New York.
Which you
and
can't.
and then hang out all day in cafes,
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
But these are the values that television and film and media implicitly teach. So, you know, we as content creators have a responsibility for the content that we create. So what are we putting out into the world? And organizations like Gold House and TAF and also CAPE, which supports professionals in the industry, really have a big part in shaping how we can do those things. And to know that there are grassroots organizations that we can work with is super important, because as Janet was saying, they support projects from the ground up, not after the bandwagon has already been built and is on the way. They are creating the bandwagon, and I think that's really important. So if you guys can support organizations like CAPE and Gold House and TAF, that's one way you can make a contribution, regardless of what your sphere is. And the other thing is, you know, is to keep advocating for yourselves as people of color. I mean, I think this is, you know, one of the things about Asian Americans, even though it's not historically borne out, one of the stereotypes is that we're quiet, that we're silent, and that we keep our heads down. That's actually not true.
Not anymore.
Well, even historically, if you think about like things like the California grape strike, where the Filipino Americans and African Americans and Cesar Chavez came together, there's a history of activism. But again, now we're straying into politics, but I will say that it is just important for all of us to use our voices and make contributions in the way that we can.
Janet, can you tell us also a little bit about Gold House, just for people who don't know that
Gold House
organization?
was born, it's a person that you may have heard of named Bing Chen, who worked at Google, and he saw how there was this incredibly vibrant community of Asian Americans in Silicon Valley, and he came to me and said, can you gather all the Asians in Hollywood? We should figure out what we can do together. These are two very, very powerful groups of people in our community. And we brought on people like Daniel and others to say, well, it turned out we had a kind of work session at CAA, and we said, what do we want to accomplish? And it turned out the people in Silicon Valley had the exact same interests as us, which is visibility and representation. They said, we've bought and sold companies, built platforms, we have a lot of money in our pockets, but we still don't have shows and movies where our children can see themselves. And why is that? And we're like, well, we've been trying to make these shows and movies, and we need funding. And so we have done whatever we can to pull in resources from all different segments of society now, you know, whether it be finance and fashion and, you know, Silicon Valley startups, whatever, VCs, to promote projects. You know, we started with a couple, we got very lucky because one of the films we first promoted was Crazy Rich Asians. And after that, Warner Brothers so appreciated what we did in terms of multicultural marketing and saw that we could reach the community in ways that they wouldn't know how, you know. And we just started creating a stronger and stronger network, having VIP screenings. We had people who wrote checks to buy out theaters, and it turned out to be incredibly effective. And now we are able to consult with all the major studios and platforms. So that part is great, and you know, it has become a very, very loud, probably one of the loudest advocates for our community in all areas, and working with media, traditional and social media, very effectively. But you know, the problem for content creators like us is that we are still pitching stories that we want to tell, which are authentic to us, but we're pitching them to people that aren't from our community. So the way that they're evaluating them is you know, ineffective. It's not, we're always trying to prove, no, this would be good. You know, there is enough data now to say that diversity sells. So finally they've figured that out, is that we are, you know, if you look at what has been commercially successful, often it's about people of color. I mean, that is across the board. So we have that, but somehow if the executive that you're pitching to, the finance that you're pitching to, doesn't feel the story, they're not likely to want to invest in it. So we're at a really funny place now, because there should be enough evidence at this point. You know, after Crazy Rich Asians came out, any project that had very rich Asians in them was likely to get noticed, but that's all they could see.
Right.
So it's like, oh, so everyone's crazy and rich. So, okay, fine, we can do that. But so it opened up that genre. Now everything everywhere opens up. This is an unusual genre. I don't know what's going to happen. But, shows like Beef and other things are pushing them. Like, for us, we need to, it's the creativity is a funny process that I think involves both giving people something that they're familiar with, but also something that's fresh and different. You have to find that right balance. We just can't make the same old, same old. It's not interesting to us, it's not interesting to the audience. But how we keep pushing the envelope when what we're trying to do is new and innovative is very difficult when people are looking at past accounting reports.
Can I just pick up on that really quickly?
Yes, please.
There were these tried and true unspoken rules in Hollywood that were always in place. One, no one is going to want to see an Asian face on their screen. No one is going to want to see an Asian face kiss someone on their screen. If you remember a movie called Romeo Must Die, it was with Jet Li and Aaliyah.
Yes.
That movie was based on Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And there's no kissing. There's no signs of affection between Romeo and Juliet in that movie because there was the thinking that no one's going to want to see that. Similarly, there's this myth that black movies don't travel well overseas. And then came Black Panther. And then now we have Crazy Rich Asians. The important thing to note about those things were they were not data-driven conclusions. How can you have data when you've never had a sample, right? And so now we see data that prove all of these things wrong, which is why Netflix just invested $2.5 billion in Korean content. I don't know of any entertainment company that's more data-driven than Netflix. So now we're seeing the proof, and now we're seeing actual data-driven results that are changing the face of television and film.
But also we need people outside of executives to come forward and say, we will collectively, in whatever field they're in, support this art. And I think it is exciting to be the first person to do that, to break the stereotype. And I mean, the stories that my company is producing in scripted as well as non-scripted are centered around people of color as protagonists, but they're not stories that are unrelatable to anyone. You don't have to be Cambodian to understand being separated from your father. You don't have to be, black to understand certain struggles that the black community goes through in Houston as Nigerian Americans or whatever it is. And for me, it's also been hard because I am a writer first and foremost, and I've optioned books. I'm a producer on a couple projects. I've written scripted shows, and it's very hard to get somebody inside Hollywood to make that leap. And I think if I could come in and say, I already have people on my team that I've put together who are going to pay for it. You don't have to spend that much money. We'll own 50% of this project. You just have to show it on your streamer, or you just have to distribute it and put it in your theaters. That is a different model that I would also like to see happen, because the person who writes the check, regardless of what field you're in, is always the one with the power. And there are a lot of people with that kind of power. Especially, we're talking about Asian Americans. Asian Americans are the most affluent community in this country. And so, I've made it my mission to mentor 2 or 3 young women in their 20s and 30s and guide them, everything from here, take my entertainment lawyer, which I never knew about for ages, to, make sure when you're on this show that every time you're shown on screen, they say your whole name, not just your first name. I don't care how long it is, your whole name. They're doing it for him, they better do it for you. Because I didn't have anybody who told me that stuff. And so now in this new phase of my career, I want to tell them, you don't need to do anything to help me. I'm coming in with my gang of help to help you. And are you going to do this, or is your competitor going to do this? And that is a conversation I would love to have. So if there are any investors, whether they're in food or finance or tech or whatever, and you want to see programming that your brown and black children can also see themselves in, please come see me. I'm very easy to find. I have some things in scripted, some things in unscripted, in TV and in film, and I would be happy to tell you where to put your money.
I
to
would
be fair
love
to
to
all our
see-
panel, I think Daniel Day Kim will say, "Come see me." Eric Nava,
Well,
but
we're-
that's what this is about.
We are so
convening.
easy to find. I would like to see one day a studio run by Asians with Asian content, Asian investors, Asian creators. I'd like to see a TV channel doing the same, a music company. Why not?
Yeah, I
Why
think
not?
Tyler
Why don't
Perry
we all
has
work
done
together?
well.
Why don't we have a collective?
Yeah.
You know, there's so many possibilities. All the pieces are there. We just haven't knitted them together.
We have Tyler Perry for the African American community, Macro Studios for the African American community. We're working together as a community, as Asian Americans, to try and create that kind of infrastructure. But that just takes capital.
Yeah.
And there's just no way around that.
And I so feel you about, the KISS and the leading ladies. When I was living in Los Angeles and I was auditioning, I would see, women who were about the same range, professionally and everything else as me, get auditions, and I would ask my agent, like, how come I'm not going up for this role? And they would say, oh, they love you, Padma, but they're not going ethnic with this role. And then I said, well, what about that person? She's playing a best friend. They said, you're not going to be hired as anyone's best friend. So I was like, well, what? And I would have loved to have been a leading lady. I want to see a leading lady. I want to see an Asian Lara Croft. I want to see all of those things. And I want to see us make mad, passionate love on the big screen. I do.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the quote that someone's tweeting from our panel.
But it is interesting, Crazy Rich Asians was such a big event for us, and Janet's absolutely right that for those of us who were producing, for like a year afterwards, everyone wanted the next Crazy Rich Asians. So if you didn't have that as a producer, you're not getting your project greenlit. But when you talk about projects like The Harvest, it's really important to understand that even though there are certain parts of Asia, Asian America, that are incredibly affluent, we also have the largest percentage of people in New York City living under the poverty line.
Absolutely.
So we are a diaspora of 33 different ethnicities speaking over 100 different languages. And so this is just a small portion of Asian America. And when we talk about the Hmong American community, we talk about Sri Lankan community, we talk about Cambodian communities, this is all part of Asian America too. And it's just as important to tell those stories as well as the crazy rich stories, So
Because it's good for business and it makes for more interesting content. I don't have to be Cambodian or black to be interested in those stories. I'm interested in those stories because they're compelling.
yes.
And I don't want to see the same old program on every network or in every movie theater.
And
And I
the
don't think you guys do either.
And the knock is that, okay, this is all identity politics, this is all race politics. Well, it's actually not. It's actually the opposite. It's about creating understanding so all of us can come together. That's really
I mean,
what
for
it's
us,
about.
that's the power of this creative industry. It's a really way to bridge between countries too, not just within America. And also, I feel that's also the power of music. I want to bring back to Eric. This last 2.5-3 years of the pandemic, we've also seen in the United States a spike in anti-Asian crimes, hate crimes, and all. And Atlanta saw terrible killings of spa workers. Eric, you're from Atlanta originally. You travel the world. I've seen you in Asia. I've seen you here. How do you feel from the music perspective? Is music immune to this, or you actually went out on your own too, in a way? To have agency and control your own career.
Yeah.
But as you think about Asians in the music industry, the reality, there's a lot of Asian Americans, but you don't even think they're Asian American. Bruno Mars, he's Filipino actually. But what do you see and what do you experience in the music world?
I think the challenges that we are hearing about in the film and TV world are the same in music, but I would almost argue that music, from an Asian American perspective, is a step even behind. Because it's not as visual of a format. I think when you're able to see on TV and in screens actors playing incredible roles, you can imagine yourself and dream yourself being an occupation or whatever it is that you want to become. Music is something that we listen to kind of passively, and so oftentimes it kind of is I think, second priority to TV and film. But having said that, that's why it's so important for musicians and people who want to create, even outside of film and TV, to have this advocacy, which I think Gold House is really working towards as well, which I think has been a great partnership with musicians up and coming. But I'm really excited to see these young musicians come up through the internet, and how do we encourage them to tell their stories through song and through shorter, potentially music videos or documentaries around their creative process to share their stories, because again, we are all human and that's what's connecting us. It's a different form. It may be a podcast, maybe TV, film, music, spoken word, whatever it is, but we all have different strengths and abilities, and how do we really bring those to the forefront? And I think as a young creative, that's kind of my best way to give back to people who are Gen Z or younger, and trying to identify those people and help bring them up. Because as an independent artist, I'll be very frank, it has been a challenge to figure that out. As somebody with, if you look at it from the outside, it's like he has millions of followers, doing 100,000 tickets around the world. This is a big business, but I can tell you right now, it is still not an easy business to figure out as an independent artist. And so it is a struggle. We try our best, we do our best, and I'm so glad to be with incredible, I guess, moguls, titans of industry, and to be very frank, so many of these people on stage have inspired me growing up, and seeing how they've built their careers, and so I'm trying to translate that into the music sphere, which is a challenge, but one that I take on happily. Yeah.
See, Eric, you're just making us feel old, right? No. There is a question that came in, anyone in the group. Really, I mean, you are such, even you, Eric, models of success. But one of the questions is, how do we, in a way, achieve success but not perpetuate the model minority myth? There they go again. Oh, they're so successful, right? How do we break away? It's almost like this catch-22, right?
I can only worry about what my goals are. I can only do what I think is right. And I'm not here to walk backwards just to prove somebody wrong.
Anyone else?
I have a thought on that. I actually think, I've started to go into the world of film and TV as well. But what really excites me is, for the past few years, we've had incredible stories of Asian excellence. We have superheroes, we have Crazy Rich Asians, we have these incredible, beautiful people doing incredible things on screen. I really want to be a part of telling stories that are completely counter to that. That are completely human, to show people who are flawed, who are real, who we have our issues, we have our demons, we have our struggles, because that, I think, is so relatable to anybody, anywhere. And so I think when it comes to the model minority myth, even through the content that we're creating, we're able to really do something against that stereotype, I should say.
I wanted to add to that. You're right, because, to dovetail on what I was saying earlier, like, now that I'm well known in the nonfiction space, I'm getting all these acting roles. And I'm the same person and the same actor I was when I was pounding the pavement. I was probably better then because I wasn't out of practice. And so I think the way you do it, exactly, is to tell those stories, to go back to storytelling, and say, yes, we are model citizens or, model success stories, but we're also this. As Daniel was saying, we also have a lot of Asians living below the poverty line, and those stories are also just as compelling and just as important to hear and see and feel.
The reason why stereotypes exist to begin with is because there's a lack of other representation. So we think that the one thing that we see, i.e. Bruce Lee, is all of Asian America. And to this day, there's a very good study that was done by TAF and a group called Launch recently, and they asked 5,000 people across America, and this was done this year, I would say 2022, and they asked them to name a prominent Asian American. Guess what the number one answer was? Can anyone tell me what the number one answer was?
I know.
Jackie Chan?
Yeah.
Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee? The number one answer was, I don't know.
Sad.
43% of people could not name a single prominent Asian American. Second was Bruce Lee, at a distant 21 or 22%. And then,
That's awful.
and then it was Jackie Chan. But also note, we have a female Asian American vice president.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
Less than 4% knew our vice president and could name her as a prominent Asian American. So this is why stereotypes exist, because we don't have other representation out there. And so there's something called the burden of representation also, whereby, the actors and the portrayals that we are able to perform are then become, we have to represent all of Asian America. And we can't have that burden. We have to be able to play the heroes, the villains, the complicated characters. We have to play the entire spectrum of humanity. We are all called to do that because that's what we are as human beings. We are not just one thing. So when I think about The Harvest, and when I think about movies that show us not as heroes, like the reason I'm so interested in this Bill Huang story is because he's a Gordon Gekko of our time. And I love that complex character. He's not a hero, and that's okay. We should be able to play those too. That's the challenge, and we have to be able to even be mediocre. The reason that the model minority myth exists is because it ignores every other Asian American experience. I live in Hawaii. I can tell you that it's not a model minority in Hawaii. So. And that's glorious. We should, that was a New York Times op-ed, we should have the ability to be mediocre, as well as everything else.
I would say that applies to those people off screen. It's not just what we represent on screen. I am pretty aware that I'm being scrutinized now in this position, and I'm human. I am just me. I haven't changed. I'm not going to be different because I have a position. We're all vulnerable. We're all complex. I think that's the message. On and off screen, we're all in this together. We're all human. I was reading a book, and this woman made a really interesting comment. Like 99% of humans have the same things in common. It's that 1% where we differ, and somehow we're so focused on the differences. And even my son says, "Mom, why are you so talking about race all the time? If the goal is for us to all be one and be race blind, why draw attention?" I think we're hopefully getting to that point. We've been in a transition moment where it's been important to highlight the inequities, but the goal really is to join hands in humanity and to transcend race. For the time being, we feel that we need to amplify our voices because they have been so unheard.
But it is an exciting time
It is
right
a
now.
very
I want
exciting
to
time.
focus on that
Absolutely.
because there's never been a better time in entertainment and in arts and literature, for all of these untold stories. And I can only hope, as I'm sure all of you guys too, that it keeps going and keeps proliferating.
It was wildly different when I started in Hollywood in the 80s. If you had like a studio executive say, "Oh, if you can get Tom or Tom, we'll greenlight your movie," they meant Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise. There were about 4 or 5 different genres: the buddy comedy, the action. They were all with guys, all white guys. That was the template for making movies. No subtitles. No. That's why the Joy Luck Club, it's impossible that it even got made. It had subtitles, it had flashbacks, all these things. We were talking about unwritten rules. So there's been a sea change, and now people know, and I think social media and the streamers have actually helped stimulate this desire to reach eyeballs everywhere in the world. I'm still very much in favor of watching movies in a theater, but this idea that it's no longer just appealing to the lowest common denominator with the broadest movie, that is no longer the case. So what might be considered in the past as niche voices and niche projects are actually no longer so niche because the A24s are finding their audience with very, very distinct projects, distinct voices, and I think that is something that's hugely, hugely positive for our community.
Absolutely. Hey, sped by so fast this hour together. I just want to share a couple questions that have come in. We can strategically run out of time and not answer some. One is, does anybody have any comments on the writer's strike that's playing out right now in Hollywood? There is one. Tell Eric
Not
Nam.
here.
Tell Eric Nam I love him. He served as an inspiration.
Love you too.
Wait,
What do you say?
that was
somebody
my
going to take
question.
responsibility for
Will you
that?
tell Eric Nam that I
Yes,
love him?
we all tell Eric Nam we love you.
I love you all too.
But another one I found particularly intriguing is actually Eric and I did a session on music and K-pop, and one of the amazing things about K-pop is the audience. So there's the BTS army, there's the Blinks for Blackpink, and Eric has Nom Nation.
Yes.
They're all following us right
Nom
now.
Nation, hello.
So the question was, as you think about creative economy, how do we use social media, those TikTok influencers? Is that a way that young people can get into this business when they don't have those connections? There's no one backing them. Is there something through technology we can take back and enter this field? Comments on any of those, right? And
We don't know
then we'll
how
have a
long
wrap-up.
TikTok's going to be available to us, number one.
Or
There's supposed to be a movement, or Twitter for that matter.
Can I just
That's
say
how
that
quickly things change.
I just spent time in Vancouver at the TED conference, and the entire theme of this conference was AI. And so I have to kind of share some of the thoughts and ideas that came out of that. One of the basic things is that our industry is going to change drastically very soon. Music, film, television, it's all going to be changing because the technology is growing so rapidly and so quickly that we will not be able to distinguish truth from fake. You've all seen the Tom Cruise deep fake on TikTok. The company behind that deep fake was at TED, and they can literally put Tom Cruise's face on anybody, and it's very, very difficult to distinguish the fact that you're not Tom Cruise, that this person isn't Tom Cruise. In the music industry, they did a demonstration where they had Pharrell singing his song Happy, and then they had it translated by someone else, and then they applied it to Pharrell's face, and it came out in Spanish in Pharrell's voice with a perfect lip sync, all within 10 minutes.
No.
So you can have a singer singing their song in every different language perfectly, and it's indistinguishable from the original. So you can see the copyright issues ahead. And with ChatGPT now, it's in its infancy, but it's already able to write scenes and scripts. This is part of, to go back to the other question about the writer's strike, this technology is racing much faster than our government and other industries' ability to regulate it. And so this is a significant way that our industry is changing that we all need to be prepared for, everyone on this stage, everyone in this room, educators as well. And so the ways that can influence our intake of entertainment and the creation of entertainment should not be underestimated.
Absolutely. I have to, I have to bring it to a close. First, what a dynamic panel. Of course, there's superstars in the... They're superstars, I say, of course, in the creative industry, but in many ways, through your work, through who you are, you're also a powerful activist. With Eric working on mental health issues for Asian Americans, for all we're doing in terms of representation. Thank you so much. I just want to close and ask each of you, is there, as we think about the audience out there watching us all over the world, they watch you all, but is there a piece of film, a music, or future project of your own that you want to say as we think about the real diversity of creative excellence stemming from Asian or Asian American stories? Is there a book or something, or a movie or film you would say to them, go log in, watch this, read this, buy this?
Well, of course, I want everyone to watch Taste the Nation on Friday and tell all their friends, but there is a very talented young Afghan-American writer called Jamil Jan Kochai, and we feature him on the Afghan episode this season. But then after we filmed with him, I found out about him through The New Yorker, and he's such a lovely writer, and he has a couple of books, short stories. He was nominated for a National Book Award, and I hosted the National Book Awards in November, and I ran into him by accident. And he writes so beautifully. He writes about growing up as a teenager in this country and playing all those video games, the Call of Duty and stuff like that, and having to kill all of the people in the video that look exactly like him, and his brothers and his cousins and his fathers, and what that does to him as an Afghan American teenager and psychologically. And it brings up so many issues in such a succinct, creative way with short fiction that I highly recommend it. He's a very gifted young writer, and I've been telling everybody about
His
him.
name again?
Jamil John Kochai.
Thank you.
Kochai. He has a couple books of short stories out and a
Beautiful.
novel.
Eric, anything you want to flag for people? Or?
I have a new album coming this year, and a tour, and a movie called Transplant, where it's my first step into acting. So all that is coming very, very soon. And that was a very self-serving thing. But hey, you asked, and
Hey.
here we are.
That's why
You
we're
need to
here.
speak up. You
myself.
need to advocate for yourself.
Janet, anything you want
I
to tell
can't
people to pay
talk
attention
about
to?
any
or-
of the things that I have coming out, I don't think. And there's two things I want to flag, but I'm not supposed to talk about one of them.
Okay, don't
I was
talk about
told.
that one. The other one.
But there's, okay, I will talk about two documentary films that came out last year. One was Daniel was an executive producer on, which I absolutely loved. It didn't make it to the nominations level, and I suddenly forgot the name of it. It has the most unusual name.
That memorable.
The movie is so memorable. It has a really odd name.
No, it's
What was it
called.
called?
the name of a town.
It's called Bad Axe.
Bad Axe. And it is an incredible documentary film about a mixed race family who owns a restaurant and what happens during the pandemic. It is fantastic.
Okay.
And thank you, Danny, for introducing me. It made it to the short list. It was not nominated. The other one that was nominated is called Strangers at the Gate, which is about a veteran who came back from Afghanistan. He happens to live in a town full of Afghans, and he has nothing but hatred for Muslims. And he decides to go to a temple because he's plotting something. He's a little bit out of his mind, and he's plotting to get back somehow. And in the course, it brings tears to my eyes, in the course of visiting this temple, they're so kind to him that he completely turns around and he actually decides to become a Muslim himself.
Wow.
It is beautiful. So those two are really incredible. I wish I could talk about the other things, but I can't.
Later, we'll tweet about it after you can. Daniel, bring us to a close.
I'll talk about a couple of things. I am working with Janet on something, and that we're very excited about. But the two projects I'll talk about here are Avatar: The Last Airbender. We're doing a live-action remake of that, and I play a bad guy, which I'm very happy about.
I can't watch that, Daniel. Shatter all my.
It is. It's nice because they're doing it with an all-Asian cast, and that's kind of the source material of it, and that's really, I think, a step forward. And the second project I'll talk about is something that was just announced. I'll be heading to Korea this September to do a spy series for Amazon, and I'll be the lead character in it. And it's notable because it will unite American actors with Korean actors in a bilingual production. So that's coming soon.
No, thank you. I think that's also a great rap project to flag because it's about bringing people together. You know, even when I was putting this together, was it like Asian creative excellence? Is it Asian American creative excellence? But this crosses these borders, some of these stories. I want to thank you all. What a great representation that we've had here from the diversity of our Asian American community. And remember, there's so much more of that. For me, I flagged earlier The Harvest, because I want to make sure you think about Southeast Asian content, the diversity of Asia. But again, happy Asian American, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Thank you all.
Thank you.